A former chairman and chief executive officer of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, Dr. Sam Amadi, joins us now to discuss the state of the nation's public electricity supply system and the federal government's consideration of stopping electricity subsidy. He will be looking at what are the likely impact of removing electricity subsidy on the people and the nation's economy are. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, Dr. Amadi, amidst this very erratic, or should I even say non-existent power supply, coupled with the harsh economic crisis that Nigerians are grappling with, it seems the federal government is also considering removing electricity subsidy. Is this the right time to talk, is this the right time to be having this type of discussion, not to even talk of attempting to implement removing the subsidy?
Clearly, it's not the right time. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of what is more politically feasible, we are facing serious cost of living crisis arising from removal of subsidy for PMS, the floating of the macroeconomic policy around floating the currency, the shortage of food supply arising from both ecological and insecurity. And so government is struggling now to head off protests and to improve livelihood. So in a sense, I mean, if you remove subsidy, technically speaking, which means increasing tariff, increasing prices, it's further going to do to inflation. We're talking about inflation that is already high. And then you're obviously going to have a much more, a bigger inflationary impact. But from the fiscal side of the electricity market, the minister has railed out 1.3 trillion naira debt to generation company, $1.3 billion to gas suppliers. All this means that the sector is financially not viable as much because the debt overhang is heavy. So something has to give in, or you have to do some balancing here. Now, the key problem is that we speak about these tariffs, without some context. First, yes, the tariff is not yet cost reflective in the sense in which industry players think around maybe marginal cost equals to price, meaning you are recovering all the marginal cost of production of electricity at the same price. So there are some degree of inefficiencies. Government is still taking some of them in terms of debt overhang, but it's not like there's a direct subsidy. This is subsidy arising from shortfall in revenue. Now, those shortfalls, some of them are because of the inefficiency of the operators themselves, who are not able to recover their money. So we have aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. There are losses arising from the fact that there's still a lot of inefficiency in the system, and so those losses constitute part of the revenue loss, which is now part of what government is owing through the bulk trader, owing to generators, and what the generators are owing to gas suppliers, which is making it difficult for gas suppliers to feed gas, enough gas for production of power, and also which is making it difficult for the discos maybe to improve the network to get more power. So invariably, there's need to improve the pricing. But I think the bigger problem is here, two kinds of issues. First is that, look, the bulk of this increase that arises from removal of subsidy will go to the poor people who are not metered. If you look at the metering plan, the structure of the metering today, many of the metered customers are the low-income consumers. They are not metered because there are not enough meter, and the high-income earners have access to procure meter for themselves, maybe use use their leverage to get discos to get a meter. So almost 70 to 80% of our meter customers are customers within the lower income bracket. So they're going to pay more for less. They don't have capacity to mitigate their payments by maybe reducing their consumption, putting off their light, doing some conservatory practices. So in essence, the bulk of the pricing effect falls on those who don't have the capacity to mitigate it, either by way of a wage increase or by way of getting metered and therefore cutting down on consumption. So invariably, removing subsidy further means loading losses on the poor who are already not able to breathe. So it has socioeconomic impact. And so when the IMF says, remove subsidy, they are looking at the physical side of it. How government will have less to pay and then improve government revenue. They're also looking at its socioeconomic impact in terms of how the people who are already suffering, who are not able to afford basic livelihood, food, health, shelter, access to education, are going to be worse off, except you mitigate that through meter rollout or through some kind of control. Again, if you look at the Electricity Act, there's provision for what they call Power as Consumer Assistance Fund. When I was chairman, many years ago, over 8-9 years ago, we tried to put together, we are planning to put together that PCFA. Up to now, we don't have it. What it's supposed to do is that there is some understanding that in trying to transition to a competitive private electricity market, there will be some initial rate shock. Prices will go up. And so the policy thought around how do we protect poor consumers by creating this Power Consumer Assistance Fund. So that's a subsidy scheme that is going to be less expensive and targeted at customers who deserve it, and working with the discos, what we call demand-side management. The discos will be able to locate their consumers who can benefit from that cash transfer, which helps them to reduce the rate impact for low income without compromising the price reflectivity of the entire sector. Again, there's also the structure of dealing with this with, for example, metering is one, demand-side management is another. And again, oftentimes we may have double rate pricing that's two-layered, meaning at a basic consumption, the price is X. So everybody who consumes, let's say, 100 kilowatt hour per month, which enables you to put your light on, maybe put a fan, put a fridge, the price is X. Now, when you consume above that price level, the price per unit increases. Now, what that does is that it safeguards a floor where the ordinary persons, low-income Nigerians who are daily getting, poorer and poorer because their income is not increasing, the cost is increasing, and they don't have mitigation. Those people will pay a fixed price for a fixed consumption level. That requires metering. So when they trigger above that level, then they enter into a different pricing bracket. So these are some of the structures you need to put in place that will help government not spend so much on subsidizing those who can afford to pay, but at the same time not exposing the very poor who are double whammy. They are facing inflationary pressure from gas, from PMS, subsidy removal for PMS. They are facing from floated currency, the dollar-naira mismatch. At the same time, they have no cushion in terms of increase in earning or economic growth that cascades to improvement, free education, free healthcare. None of that is happening to them. And this is the wrong time for these people to face obvious inflationary pressure from subsidy removal for power.
And let's not forget this intense heat wave that has descended upon us all and has made everyone even just much more hotter under the collar and making things a little more unbearable. So if they keep things as the way it is and they don't remove the subsidy, what would be the way forward? What would be the implications of that?
I think even with petroleum, PMS, I mean, you don't have to say, oh, don't remove subsidy, therefore keep the prices flat. I think two things. One, the regulator has been less, participatory in terms of going to the people, explaining the need for tariff increase. Two different things. You don't have to announce a subsidy removal, but you can have graduated incremental increments in pricing. And the first thing that has to happen is that you have to create transparency in the power sector. That's when we were there, it was a lot more transparent. We went on road shows. We were dealing with NLC, NUEE, the electricity workers. We were always on air explaining the logic for each price increase. And again, there's we did a tariff regulation that says discos should go and be consulting with their customer. So we can unlock the pricing mechanism in a way that some discos might be able to convince consumers why they should see increase. It should be consultative. It's part of the industry democracy. Consumers and operators need to sit together, and you show them the investment, and also you show them the improvement that go with that. So we don't need to say it's not either or. Either we remove subsidy and then we don't increase price. No, price can increase incrementally and in a structured manner, together with improvement in quantity, improvement in customer care, but at the same time, don't announce removal of subsidy. So you graduate improvement. As things improve, as increase the volume of electricity supply, you increase the pricing, you reduce the shortfall, and therefore you reduce government's fiscal problem. But don't just come and say, we're removing subsidy. No, you are going to say, you are gradually going to improve the pricing. And again, very important here, there's a lot of inefficiency in the sector that has to be, when you improve efficiency, you reduce cost, and therefore price, and therefore shortfall, and therefore government so-called subsidy. I mean, we cannot be subsidizing inefficiency. When I was chairman, we cut off the so-called collection loss and asked each disco, approach the regulator and show us why you can't improve collection. For example, in many discos, over 30 to 50% of the cost is because they're not able to collect their billing. There's those who consume power, whether it's ministry, government, or private persons, they sell power, they can't collect the money. And so those losses are recycled back into price increase. So if we manage and regulate efficiently, we could reduce the cost of production, and that means the price will reduce, and therefore the shortfall, the gap between what customers are paying and what government is taking in the so-called subsidy will be much less. The same with the petroleum sector. You're talking about subsidy, people say, okay, why don't you deal with corruption? Why don't you create higher level of efficiency? Then the quantity, the quantum of subsidy will reduce, and then you'll be able to see what can we chalk off, what can we add. So I think that short of removing subsidy holistically that we do with the petroleum, which is wrong at this time, politically wrong, from an economic perspective wrong. And again, let's not forget, if prices go up in a rude way, what we call rate shock, it becomes more difficult for distribution companies to collect their tariffs. It increases theft, it increases collection losses, and may even worsen the sector. So there should be a structured, gradual uplift in pricing that go together with improvement in efficiency, that go together with improvement in service delivery, and that makes it easy for both the discos to collect their money and make the customers able to pay. That's how this sector is governed. So at this point, there are 3-4 things you can do to improve efficiency, reduce pricing or cost, at the same time reduce the size of the so-called subsidy.
And talking about improving service delivery, we know that the national grid has collapsed, about 6 times between December 2023 and now. The Minister of Power gave some reasons. He talked about aging equipment and some other reasons. But I'm wondering what can be done to forestall another collapse and to prevent this from happening over and over again. We can give all the reasons we want, but at the end of the day, what we need actually are real solutions that can, boost electricity supply in Nigeria.
I think if you look at the history of since 2010, I mean, when we came in, when the reform started with the presidential roadmap on power to today, you see that there are periods of less frequency of grid collapse because there are better management at the level of the TCN and the distribution companies and the regulator and the ministry. What I mean is simple. Some of the collapses are caused by frailties in some distribution or transmission network. I mean, maybe failure, collapses. It's true, like the minister said, that with a full SCADA in place, you'll be able to optimize the wheeling and dispatch of power and coordinate, synchronize the entire system. That's true. So in absence of SCADA, we're using some retail technology. We use our cell phones, we use several things to make up. But if we improve the operations of the TCN, operations of the distribution companies themselves, you will reduce outages, you will reduce collapses. Collapses are not automatic, that because we don't have this. No, it's a function of failure to manage the network well. It's a function of the quality and the life of the network, the network itself in terms of equipment. But the human factor is high. So in my view, if you look at the history, we had less collapses, not as frequent as we have now. And what that tells you that we are having, we are getting degraded in the leadership in the sector. The quality of leadership from the regulatory policy and from the operational side is getting weaker. We need to improve it. If we improve performance, if we improve management of TCN, the network, if we discuss forced to be more efficient and then make investments, recover their money and invest more in the network, you will reduce the time, the frequency of collapses. You see, let's not take around the power sector as a magic bullet. We just close this chapter. We're going to incrementally reduce frequencies of outages, of collapses, as we improve performance, make more investment, and then we get to a point where we can now have, that kind of momentum, and then things will change. Another point is about, you need a technical power tax team. When under Jonathan we had that presidential task force, they were able to pick up some of these failures. They're able to put pressure on operators to do better. You can always optimize what you have. And I think at this point, that's a very weak leadership of the sector. And that shows in the frequency of outages and blackout. Look, you are going to have a moment, open and close. We fix everything. The pricing is correct. The operations are correct. All the finances are in. We have SCADA. No, we're going to work our way into that level of efficiency. But let's start now getting things right. And if you do that, you will reduce the frequency of outages and blackouts. That can be shown for the history, that the period between 2023, when we had this presentation, and today, when we had least number of outages, more improved power, more hours of service delivery. It's about the management of the sector and then the investment and the policies that we bring together. But there should be a quick fix, things like remove subsidy and everything will work well. No, that's not the point. Keep improving bit by bit. Do a diagnostic. How is the quality of management of the TCN going on? How is the quality of the investment? So over time, we have to get those things right, and then maybe, like I said, keep improving the pricing. Because if you improve service, improve hours of power service to people, improve customer care, metering, then you see that the level of losses and the gap between the proper pricing and the actual pricing becomes less and less, and the subsidy reduces. We shouldn't be so much angry about subsidizing power. The question is, are we seeing improvement? Government has to continuously invest in the power sector, even as it's privatized, because across Europe, this is where we are now. It's not an efficient sector, and no pretense. You have to put public finance to make it work, because they can't throw your people into darkness. They cannot say, let's price electricity out of those who can't pay, whether they have meter or not, let them languish in darkness. That can't happen. That's not a responsible socio-economic policy making, and not the best way to drive improvement of a sector.
Well, Dr. Sam Amadi, always great to have you on the show. Very thorough explanation. We appreciate you being here.